click in here for product list.view. And so I'm now kind of taking that out. And I think at this point, it should almost work. So now here we've got the Mother Earth, and we should be able to browse for things in the United States. We should be able to go back here and start typing in things like sweet potatoes, and it should filter those out. And so that's kind of where you get before the second to last piece, which is you just have to throw in something. So when you click on these add carts, they do something, right? And when you view, you need another view for the cart that has all the items that you bought. And so I did want to mention, in case you haven't noticed, that in the lab area for 3B, there's a new section on Lab 3B tips. And this is basically how to do the part part 7 here, how to modify your shopping cart. And so here you need to put the add to cart button, make it do something. And you need a cart view so you can see what's in your cart. So hopefully those are something that you can jump in and do. If we get done with this other stuff, we'll maybe work on some of that today. You guys tell me what you want to do. I'm happy to do whatever you find helpful. Let's see, for me, I kind of got everything down to that second last step in this repository. So if I was to open my Git thing, okay. I think in theory, I've got everything saved here. And I can stage all these things, and that we're up to step 7. I would suggest you do this frequently. Commit and do a push. And so now, theoretically, this should be in GitHub. So let's see if we can do that last piece, which is installing it on DigitalOcean. Is that kind of what you guys want to do? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my DigitalOcean account. And well, I have no idea how I did this. Clicking one of these buttons, eventually it will show up. Like I'm here, here's my droplet. And here's my IP address. And there's some theory that I can SSH here. What do I have? I guess I have an account there. So now I'm on that machine. Okay, so maybe you guys can help me with what you're having trouble with. Go ahead.
Just a small question. You said you'll be recording this, right? So like
yes.
At this point in the lab, that we'll be able to go back and watch it once we're there.
Yes. So yeah, hopefully you should be able to get here. So let's go ahead and see if we can kind of follow this through. And you guys are probably better than this at this than I am. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this in /var/www/ Mother Earth dot my thing is clementbyu.com, and I'm now going to do Trone Clement. And that will let me write stuff into it without having to always do sudos. Oh, okay. Here. Okay. Next, we're going to go to Etsy and Jinx. And create a new file here. Go ahead and touch.
Professor?
Yes.
On these names, we have a motherearth.myroname.com, or of course like a lab1, lab2. It matches our domain name.
Yeah.
Is it necessary they be called that in the www directory and the sites available directory? Or can we change those to maybe different names? I don't
Yeah,
know.
their directory could be different, but they need to be subdomains of whatever your domain is. So for example, eventually we're going to need to go to Mother Earth clementbyu.com. RTH. Let's see. Okay, and then go ahead and edit it. And we want to add our junk in here. The rest of the stuff looks pretty good. So what we're really hoping is that this is going to, when we go to motherearth.clementbyu.com, it's going to go to the directory var www motherearth.clementbyu.com. That's basically what we're directing here.
So that could change. We could have chosen a different.
You could have put any directory in here, but you probably want to have this same server, or you could do something else because you're going to turn in the URL. So you could do anything you want there. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Anyone online, any problems or questions?
Not up until this point. My question comes from when you have to start installing packages of the npm install.
Okay, let's see what happens here. So now we're going to go up to and put a link, symbolic link, ln.
It's supposed to be sudo on the command line.
Thank you. The real thing. Now we've got Mother Earth in here with a symbolic link to the sites available one. And then we should be able to see it. And then we should be able to do something like sudo nginx and then you can look at errors in /var/log nginx error.log. And again, all of your error messages are going to end up here. Okay. So I don't see anything too terrible here. It just started. So let's see. One thing we could okay, so now this is the part that we were having trouble with, right?
More on the NPM.
Okay. Let's see what's going on. Okay. Okay. It. Here's my version. And make sure this looks like it's got the right stuff in here. Like I've got the browse in here, so this all looks like the current version. I can go ahead and clone this thing. I'm totally amazed. I never even guessed that I had a chance of remembering my login name and password. But there you go. Okay, so now I can go into my directory here. And do a npm install. So you'll notice that when we pushed our directory back to Git, we did not get the the node modules directory. So this is where all of the packages that we needed to have were located. And that didn't get pushed up to Git. And so now what we need to do is go ahead and rebuild that directory with all of the libraries. This is kind of the way, by the way, this is how we're going to use this node package manager on the back end too. So I'm kind of excited that you guys are having this experience, because getting everything set up right on your server for this front end application will make it a lot easier when you get to do back end stuff. And by the way, just as a hint, some of you were wondering exactly what's going on. If you look at your package.json file, this is actually where he's going to have all of the dependencies that you use. So remember when we were setting up your Vue project, we specified that we wanted to have Babel and ESLint and the router. And then here's all the other stuff that he ended up using when he built this directory for you. So these are all here in the dependencies for your application. And as you add new packages, he will add it to this package.json file. Okay. Here's a bunch of more dependencies. And you'll notice in here are a bunch of scripts that you can go ahead and run. So if we say npm run build, it's actually going to run this Vue CLI service build. Just so you kind of get an idea for what's going on as we're doing stuff here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is if we go into our directory here, you'll notice that we don't have that directory with all of the libraries in it. So there's this node modules thing, so we'll need to do an npm install. One word of warning while we're waiting for this to complete. These droplets that you kind of bought the cheapest version of the droplet, right? And it has not much disk space and not much memory. So when I was trying to create the new Vue project on my droplet, it actually ran out of memory and gave me this message like, no more memory, killed it, and stuff like that. And so if you get an error like that, you might need to spin up another droplet that has more memory for whatever you end up doing. They're not that much more expensive, but just an idea that if you see that error, it's not that you're crazy, but it just means that you ran out of memory. Okay. And so here you can see all the packages that it's downloaded. And it has now created this node underscore modules directory that has all this junk in it. Okay, a lot of it's Vue things. These are all the things that your application needs to run. Okay. So now we should be able to say npm run build, and what it should do, again, remember in our package.json, we saw the build thing in there. So it's actually going to create this dist directory. And what it's really doing is it's compiling everything, and it's putting everything in build, or dist. Okay. So inside of here now, you'll notice this looks different than our directory. All we have is an index.html. We've got a JavaScript directory. We've got images, and we've got CSS. And so he's just put them all into a place that now they are generic Java, they're JavaScript and HTML. They don't need the fancy Vue compiler thing that we had when we were developing. Does that make sense?
It all runs on a single page of HTML.
Yeah, yeah. So we can actually take a look at this. And you'll notice that this looks not terribly readable, but this was actually your what you had before. Remember, your index.html really didn't have anything in it except that div, and then that's going to be filled in by JavaScript later. So yeah, it kind of just made this minified in essence here, right? So it's pretty ugly, no line feeds or anything, but it's in a form that your browser can actually look at. And if we go here to JS, you'll notice that here we've got a bunch of JS files, and he's in essence compiled all of the .views and everything into JavaScript and HTML. I think that some of you at one point asked, well, this is kind of difficult because once we make our application available, somebody can look at the source code and like steal all of our hard work. And so one solution to that is to use Vue, because by the time it gets out there to something someone's going to see, it's not the same as the source code. So it'd be very difficult for them to go back. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look at this. Now we need to go ahead and copy all this stuff into this directory we created on in var www. Okay. By the way, -r will recursively go through it. We'll copy dist / everything into /var / www / mother earth place, which means that he will have the index.html and everything that he needs to do this. Okay. And let's see. So now what do we do?
I think you should just be able to go to the URL. It should be there now. It should be on your server already.
Okay, so let's see what happens. So you're thinking I should go to Mother Earth. I think I have to edit my DNS entries for this. Does that seem familiar to anybody? And actually tell it that that domain needs to go to okay. I'm impatient. And I want to create a new A record to Mother Earth, right? By the way, if this sounds totally crazy to you, please let me know. But I think we got to do this before it's going to work. So we're going to want to go ahead and add another record just like this one, which used to go to my other stuff. That's going to go to the my droplet. record, add the record. Okay, so now with some degree of luck, motherearth.clementbyu.com should go to my IP address, and then it should go to Nginx, and everything should be happy. Yay! I can't believe this worked. So, questions?
What would the process be if you wanted to change something after you've already kind of like put it up there officially? And so then you have to kind of like reload it. Do you have to run the npm run build command again?
Yep.
Or how can you kind of use GitHub to make changes to it?
Yeah, so the process in making changes then would be to go ahead, go back and add them, make the changes, push it back to your Git repository. Then you go back here, do an update, which would suck it all back down, then do the npm build and do the copy of all the files over. Yep, that's exactly right. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
We can build it on our laptops and then put that into GitHub and then bring that down into the directory.
So that might work part of the time if all the things in that node modules were not machine dependent. But some of those may be compiled, like they may be modules that were written in C++, and they need to be compiled with the operating system that you're actually going to be serving them on. And so basically, no, it won't work. That's the bottom line. But it might work occasionally, depending on what libraries you have. So a lot of these things in node modules, if you want to watch when you're doing an npm install, actually, if you watch it go through, sometimes it's compiling junk. So it's going to, and by the way, this npm thing is like pretty incredible. It is going to, it will figure out what machine you're running on, what your operating system is, what versions of every other application you have on there. So it doesn't have a conflict between versions. So it takes care of like a million things that are normally very difficult to deal with. So let's spend a few minutes, the 5 minutes that we have left, and maybe can we talk through how all of the pieces interact inside of your Vue application? Would that be helpful? Just really quickly. And I think some of it, again, I appreciate Katie kind of giving you guys some hints here. This, where am I? So this lab 3B tips, I would suggest you take a look at this. This is like how to do that piece that we didn't give you, right? And so take a look at this. So here's kind of some useful things, I believe, on the structure. Again, main.js has the global data structures. For in our case, it's going to have the products and the cart that we want to get access to globally across all of our components. This app.vue is the code that goes on all of our pages. So if we were to take a look, let's just go through each of these with our application here. So if we look at the so here's our main.js. And again, it imported the stuff from mock data. It's put that in this data object, and then it creates a new Vue object that has that data in it, as well as the router. And if we then look at app.vue, it's going to have all this junk that appears on the top, including this logo that says Mother Earth. Here's the browse link. And Here's a link to /cart. Notice here, we're putting in actual things that are going to go in our URL to get to both the browse button and the cart. So if I was to go back here to my, to this, if I click on the browse button, notice that I go to the browse URL, okay? And then I can click on Canada or something, and it will filter out just the ones that come from Canada. If I click back here on the image, it's going to go to the URL that doesn't have anything on the back, which is that other view for home. Okay? And if I clicked on the cart, I haven't done it yet, but notice here we get the cart and all of this stuff with an app.view, so it shows up with any component. And I know that this is painful for you guys because it feels a lot like magic, but isn't this cool? I mean, it's really nice that you can put all the headers and footers in one place, and then you've got components. And if you notice, another thing that was really nice is we had this component product list that we were able to use in 2 different views, right? So we were able to use it in my browse view, in my home view, and also in my shopping cart view. And so that component nature of being able to reuse components across multiple views is kind of at the guts of good practice for web programming. So you'll see this in React or in Angular or in Ruby on Rails and any of these kind of things. So it's kind of cool. And so I guess I'm kind of apologizing that this is a steep learning curve. Does it feel like a steep learning curve to anybody? A little bit, okay? But it's really turning you from a hobbyist programmer into somebody who knows the skills that you would need to actually make a commercial website. Okay. So, any other last questions before we quit?